on for the Creation Care Alliance Earth Day Vigil. You are in the right place. We were just waiting for folks to arrive, and we are glad that you're making space to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and to be with one another from people not only in Western North Carolina, but all across the country, actually. So we're grateful for you here. In just a few minutes, you'll hear some instructions and some tips about how to be a part of the Zoom experience. And as you're signing in, I'll invite you to place your name, name yourself, and if you have room, maybe the location where you're from, or the congregation that you're a part of, or neighborhood you're a part of. And you can also put that in the chat so we can get a sense of who's here. And Catie, will we be able to see all of the attendees? Yes, we will. Welcome. Again, you're at the annual Earth Day Vigil. This is our first Zoom version of an Earth Day Vigil with the Creation Care Alliance and Mountain True. And we have shifted from the Zoom experience to the webinar experience. And so you'll only be able to see the panelists and speakers and musicians. And as you come into the Zoom arena, I invite you to place your name, and if you're part of a congregation, your congregation's name and the location of where you're coming from, so we have a sense of who we're with this evening. So I just want to say a word of gratitude for our speakers and musicians, and for Catie Morris, who is our tech Yoda, and the ways that she continues to support Mountain True and many other organizations through her wisdom and technology skills. Creation Care Alliance, if you are not aware of us, we're a program of Mountain True. We work with communities of faith and individuals caring for neighbors and creation throughout Western North Carolina, providing opportunities for inspiration, education, advocacy, and service. And so this evening will be a little inspiration and maybe a little education, and we're grateful that you're here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing a little bit. Catie, if you have some Zoom tips, and then I'll do a more formal welcome after that. That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Like Scott said, my name is Catie Morris, and I'm an AmeriCorps member at Mountain True, mostly here for the tech support. So Scott asked me to just step in and clarify some logistics about Zoom really quick. For everyone that's joining, you all are joining as attendees, so we can't see or hear you, but we do want to be able to interact with you. So throughout the vigil, Scott or other speakers may ask you to enter things in the chat. It's possible you'll be invited to raise your hand, in which case I can unmute you to speak, because we do want to be able to hear from you, even though we are not able to be with you in person today. If you have any technology issues or any questions, you are able to chat with me or all the panelists individually. So that option is there too if you need it. And then this webinar will be recorded to be posted later. So if you know someone that missed it or you want to revisit it, you can find that on the Creation Care Alliance Facebook page, hopefully later this evening, if not tomorrow. And then as we go, I'll be dropping into the chat the names and links to folks' websites so you have an idea of who you're hearing from. So feel free to open those and check those out later. I think that's all I've got on the tech side, so I'll pass it back to you, Scott.
Great, thanks. So this evening, we have shaped our time around seeing our experiences with new eyes, seeing with new eyes. We find ourselves in a time of collective challenge, facing multiple threats right now: economic, ecological, climate change, human health, and just a general sense of division in a lot of places. We in the Creation Care Alliance believe that we are all needed to move toward a better future. We need better environmental and social policies and laws, to be sure. It's crucial for schools and organizations to engage in this struggle, for businesses, nonprofits, individuals, neighborhoods, even online groups. We'll need citizens, change agents, reformers, and rebels to bring in a more equitable and healthy world. Faith communities have a unique and beautiful opportunity to join in the work sharing, love, and care. At our best, we share good news and light with a world that's hurting. We can see that poverty, climate change, racism, and homelessness are branches among many others that have their roots in broken relationships. What we are facing is a spiritual crisis. This vigil, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, is a step toward right relationships, including music and wisdom from around Western North Carolina, and we are grateful that you are here. In a few minutes, after some speaking and some experiential time, we will invite you to position yourself to be outside. It's raining in some places and it's cold in others, but maybe you could at least be near a window. And if you aren't, we will be showing images on your screen that would help you be connected to nature during this time. So just a heads up that that's going to be coming a little bit later. I'll invite you to prepare for our time together as we move into this experience of vigil. Laura.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Laura Collins, and welcome all of my earth-loving, God-loving friends. I'm a Presbyterian minister who has most recently served a Unity church, and I'm a longtime resident of West Asheville. And it was raining here right up until Scott said that we were going to be invited outside, and then the sun broke through the clouds. So, Scott, I think that was rather auspicious for our vigil here tonight. So we are in this time of uncertainty and anxiety and unclarity about what is going to happen next in our world and in our personal lives. And so I'd like to call us together tonight with an invocation of peace. And I thought about calling in the directions, but this invocation comes from my own ethnic as well as spiritual roots, which are mostly Celtic. And it's not exactly a calling in the directions. It does call in the directions, but it calls it all of the elements. And it calls us, it invites us into the peace of those elements. So I invite you now, some of you may have brought a candle with you, and if you have, I'm going to light mine. And I invite you to take a deep breath and to become aware of your body. Sometimes with these screens, it's a little harder to be fully present. So I invite you to pull yourself fully present to this experience now. Take a deep breath into your belly and let it out with a sigh. And join me in this call to peace by Scottish writer Fiona MacLeod. Deep peace I breathe into you. Deep peace, a soft white dove to you. Deep peace, a quiet rain to you. Deep peace, an ebbing wave to you. Deep peace, red wind of the east from you. Deep peace, gray wind of the west to you. Deep peace, dark wind of the north from you. Deep peace, blue wind of the south to you. Deep peace, pure red of the flame to you. Deep peace, pure white of the moon to you. Deep peace, pure green of the grass to you. Deep peace, pure brown of the earth to you. Deep peace, pure gray of the dew to you. Deep peace, pure blue of the sky to you. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the sleeping stones to you. Deep peace of the flock of stars to you. Deep peace, deep peace. In the name of the one power, peace. In the name of all of the elements, peace, peace, peace.
So my name is Will Posey. I'm so grateful for that opening of our time together of speaking and breathing and receiving peace. Reminds me of the kinds of stories that we tell in the tradition that I come from. My name is Will. I'm a pastor at First United Methodist Church in Murphy, North Carolina. In my faith tradition, this is the time of year where we tell all kinds of Easter stories about the resurrection of Jesus. And one of them, he's speaking peace to an anxious room of his disciples. In another one, Jesus surprises a couple of disciples. There's this story that we tell this time of year about the road to Emmaus. And we're talking about seeing anew and seeing with new eyes. And this, for us in the church tradition, is almost a paradigmatic story for seeing anew. There's these two disciples, and they're leaving Jerusalem, and they're on their way to Emmaus. Jesus has been crucified, and they suspect that he is still, in fact, dead. And on their way to Emmaus, a stranger joins them on the road and says, "What are y'all talking about?" Unbeknownst to them, but we get let in on the joke. It's really Jesus. So in the course of their traveling and going there, they say, "What are you talking about?" And they say back to the stranger, they say, "Don't you know? Haven't you read the news? Have you opened your Twitter feed in the last 24 hours? Haven't you got a clue what's going on?" And the stranger just lets them go on for a little while. And then he begins to open their eyes. And these folks who thought they knew realized they had no idea. And so he talks to them about the prophets and the wisdom of the ages and how it was that things were to transpire the way they did. And finally, the strangers, as they arrive at their destination, they invite the stranger in to stay with them for the evening. And they sit down, and the stranger does something amazingly familiar. He takes a loaf of bread and he breaks it, and he gives it to them. And in the moment of breaking the bread, of sharing that gift, their eyes are opened, and all of a sudden they realize that the stranger all along was Jesus. And they run back to where they had come from, and they tell the other disciples that they had seen Jesus. I wonder in this moment if in their walk back to Emmaus again, they weren't seeing and experiencing things differently at that moment too. I've been in Murphy for almost 2 years now. When I first got here, I started talking with one of our Cub Scout leaders, and he started telling me about this thing called square foot exploring. I said, "Square foot exploring? What in the world is that?" And he said, "Well, You mark out 1 square foot on the ground, and then you explore it. Oh, he said, in every square foot, if you look hard enough, you find entire civilizations filled with work and play, with competition and cooperation. And the more he explained it to me, the more I realized that that's exactly the kind of thing I used to do as a kid all the time. And it's the kind of thing that I now do as a parent with my 3-year-old son. You know, we crouch down low to the ground, and we trace a parade of ants as far as we can, or we wonder how a tiny acorn could possibly become an oak tree. And as I've thought about this new discovery of square foot exploring, I think that it's the kind of thing that Annie Dillard wrote about in her book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Pilgrim at Tinker Creek is this kind of extended meditation on creation and all of its tenderness and harshness, its beauty and wonder. And she taught me a new word. Maybe I'm saying it right, maybe not. Maybe more literate panelists can correct me on this one. But I think the word is fecundity, which is a word that talks about the diverse proliferation of all of creation. And in the end, after living through the seasons of Tinker Creek and paying close attention to all of creation, from bullfrogs to quail to grass to dragonflies, she says that she longs for the prayers of the dying to not be more, but thank you, thank you. I think for me, that's the word for this season. Thank you, thank you. Not just as a word that we say as our prayer in death, but as a way of life. Whether it's on the Emmaus Road or Tinker Creek or square foot gardening or your own backyard, seeing anew or having our eyes opened is a gift that we receive. I think that's important. It's a gift that we receive. It's not something that we muster up on our own. Instead, it's something we receive from outside of ourselves, like being woken up from a dream, or like having someone flip on the lights in a dark room. And such a gift seems most often to come through patient companionship, which means a willingness to listen and to hear, or to have your eyes opened, and to travel at a pace that allows for those things to happen. Just this past Wednesday on Earth Day, my son and I got home and he said, I want to go for a hike. And so my 3-year-old and I, we decided to go for a hike. And whenever I think about that, oftentimes I think about how John Muir said he didn't really care for the word or the thing. He said he preferred that we saunter in the wilderness. He says that in the Middle Ages, when people were passing through villages on their way to Jerusalem, and people asked where they were going, they would say, alla Sante Terre, or to the Holy Land. And so those people became Sante Terreers, or saunterers, a word that perhaps carries greater reverence, and maybe gratitude, than something like going for a hike. One of the things I've discovered where I am in Murphy, in this particular season that we are in, and in the place where I am, we are in the mountains of western North Carolina, surrounded by farmland and national forest. And so in this season we're in right now, plenty of families have found themselves at a slowed pace. There's a family in our congregation that I serve that has talked about their girls for the first time in a very long time, being able to run and play on the farm. In our Zoom confirmation class this morning, we played a little scavenger hunt, and I asked all of the kids to go out and to find something alive in their homes. And they were very creative with what they found. Those 2 girls from this particular family came back with 2 chicks. These are their quarantine chicks. Their family, when they talk about this season, they talk about it as a time of gratitude, of rediscovery, and of seeing anew the place that had been so familiar that it became foreign to them. But now, they've had the occasion, not necessarily to plant their flag, but maybe to sink their toes down deep into the place where they are and discover with gratitude and with new eyes the place where they are and the people that they are with. And so I think for me, I'm grateful for Scott in giving us the guidance in organizing this vigil. But the word for today and for the season and maybe for all the time isn't more, but thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So part of our time together not only was inspired by the walk to Emmaus and the Hebrew scriptures, but also Joanna Macy and her work to reconnect. And the Creation Care Alliance has utilized her wisdom for quite some time. And she has 4 moves to help society take a leap of maturity. And the first starts with gratitude. And the second is honoring suffering. The third is seeing with new eyes, where we get the name and the theme for our evening. And the last is going forth or moving forth. And so you'll see the shape of our time together has those elements. And we've just heard a little bit about gratitude and thank you. And so now I'm going to invite you to step into an embodied experience. If we were together, we would be outside most likely, unless it was raining, which happens fairly frequently for our Earth Day vigils. But I invite you to turn to a window or a favorite picture of nature, or if you do have some creature, a dog or cat or a chick in your house, feel free to engage with them. But we're just going to take an uncomfortable 1.5, 2 minutes. So it'll be kind of silent on the screen, but I'm inviting you to listen deeply to what you see. Allow yourself to be attracted to something that you're seeing and experiencing. It might be the sound of the wind, might be the dance of the light. If you're unable to be close to a window or outside, we will have images that Catie's prepared for us come across your screen, and you can see nature from around Western North Carolina and beyond. People have sent us in these images from their congregations and from their homes for you to see. And so no matter where you are, you should have access. So I invite you now to take some time, and I will chime a singing bowl when I'm calling you back. So if you're outside far away from your computer or your phone, listen in for the chime, and then we'll call you back. Some of you are already responding to the invitation in the texting box. Invite you to share words of gratitude, knowing that not all of us are in a place of gratitude and maybe we weren't able to see. But for those of us that were, we can amplify or allow that to echo or ripple out by speaking it or typing it to one another. So I invite you to share a response, what you might notice within yourself, and what drew your attention, what are you grateful for when you interacted with nature? And as we continue to offer those gratitudes, Jenna was going to share with us some music.
Thank you for that invitation, Scott. I could have kept looking out the window at those beautiful photos that everyone sent in. This is a tune called Walk Slow by Heather Berry and Tom T. Hall. And it is a song that I have really enjoyed walking with in these days, and I hope you will as well. Walk slow, count the butterflies you pass, walk slow. There are daisies in the grass, life is fast and we're forever on the go. Take the time to take it in, walk slow, walk slow. Let us show the world a smile, walk slow. As if you were a child, enjoy Mother Nature and her show. We will walk along with you, walk slow, walk slow. As you travel down life's way, walk slow. As you live it day by day, pay attention as you go, walk slow. Walk slow, through the sunshine and the rain, walk slow. You might not pass this way again. Enjoy Mother Nature and her show. Savor all you've come to know, walk slow, walk slow. And maybe you'll lead the way, walk slow. Don't let any go astray, or be confident upon the path you chose, so that others may keep up, walk slow, walk slow. As you travel down life's way, walk slow. As you live it day by day, pay attention as you go, walk slow. Savor all you come to know, walk slow.
So 50 years ago, coming out of prophetic words of death and destruction spoken by scientists and politicians and teachers, a teaching across our lands began kicking off the movement that today we know as Earth Day. This teaching began as a call to see polluted rivers. It did help that the Cuyahoga River in Ohio had burst into flames, and the Union oil well had spilled over 200,000 gallons into the Pacific Ocean near Santa Barbara. This teaching began to call us to attention to notice the gray-brown air, which was trying to fill our lungs over major cities. This teaching began to hopefully help us to become aware that the water tables under our soil were diminishing. This teaching began as a way to hear stories that whole species were becoming extinct due to habitat destruction as humans encroached far and wide into wild spaces. And today in 2020, I am appalled that we still have to learn about our home. Creation that literally gives us our life, our breath, replenishes our bodies that are made up primarily of water, that provides our food and our homes. We are still in a great need to understand this system through a lens in which we are not agents to control it. Instead, we must learn a new lens. Finally, can we see with new eyes that we have been placed within this ecosystem to care for it? The early teachings were to wake us up, to expand our minds and our hearts to the destruction of the ultimate power that we have over our natural habitat. And in spite of this movement that began over 50 years ago as writers and loud voices like Rachel Carson tried to teach us to see with new eyes that the natural world was our home and not some inanimate thing that we were to control, still today we see only dimly. They tried so hard. Rachel Carson in her writing sought to wake us up to see and to truly lament that we had lost our connection to the earth as one of interrelationship, of awe and wonder and mystery. One of Miss Carson's gifts was to expose children and youth to the pure joy of experiencing nature. Actually, a student under her tutelage years later wrote, Miss Carson's sensitive and effective approach stimulated my own youthful curiosity and helped me to both love and understand nature. And indeed, Carson herself wrote, if I had influence with the good fairy who is supposed to preside over the christening of all children, I should ask her that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life, as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of our later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength. And so with this quote, that's over 50 years ago, it greatly saddens me. I find deep lament that we are slowing down our outdoor experiential programs instead of continuing to expand them. It seems that we have found ourselves in sterile preoccupation with go, go, go. In my own home state of Texas, Houston ISD shut down their outdoor education centers in 2018. After over 25 years where they offered thousands of fifth graders from the urban sprawl of Houston to live in the woods for 3 days, to learn in, about, and through explicit outdoor experiences. And it saddens me to hear that we are still creating more and more learning modalities that are screen-based rather than outdoor-based. Sure, a controlled environment inside walls and windows is much safer and easier to manage than the wildness of even our backyards and our parks. And it is in these truths that I hear Joanna Macy's teaching that in owning and honoring our pain for the world and in daring to experience it, we learn the true meaning of compassion, to suffer with. We have been and continue to be called into a cycle of compassion. In the midst of this pandemic, finally, maybe, we, the privileged for far too long, are called also to struggle with our natural world and to walk together with our neighbor. Finally, maybe, the shouts that we can do this together are opening our eyes to notice the need and the truth that all of our struggle begins with naming our own vulnerabilities, naming where we are, lamenting and offering our grief when we see extinctions and fires and hurricanes, so that maybe we can begin to know where to go next. Right now, as we all know, We are in the midst of a global pandemic. We have watched and read stories of pandemics before and still did not heed the lessons offered. From the plague to bringing disease to these Native Americans, from Ebola, MERS, SARS, and HIV/AIDS, our scientists and our epidemiologists and our climatologists and others, for years, they've offered us insight into their projections, their learnings, and I don't know, but for some reason, we cannot seem to get it. Why do we need such remediation? And still, the resilient trees sway. Right now, outside my window, they are moving back and forth without breaking in the wind. And still, the winds blow the seeds through the air for redistribution. And still, the birds continue to look and find nesting materials to build nests for their next broods of fledglings. And still, the sun rises and the moon waxes and wanes. And then fires ravish the Australian land mass. Scores of animals are consumed in the fires. Hectares of forest are ravaged in the flames. And still, our rivers percolate over rocks and fishes swim upstream to lay their eggs, and the tides go and they come. And still, the ruby-throated hummingbirds return to these Appalachian mountains as they did this last week. And so may our eyes see, finally, with a new lens to the wonders and the mystery of all life, even amidst all the pain and the truth of death. May it be so.
Shalom. My name is Rabbi Philip J. Bentley. I'm a retired rabbi in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Been involved with environmental issues for over 50 years. I'd like to tell you about a benefit that we're getting from the coronavirus, a global environmental benefit. I'm sure you already know about it. We're burning less fuel, coal consumption is down, CO2 emissions are reduced, cleaner water and cleaner air are noted around the world. For example, for the first time in decades, the waters of the canals of Venice are clear enough to see fish. This reminds me of a biblical lesson which makes clear for me how human events can benefit the environment and how we can learn from them. I have to start by telling you about a biblical law, the sabbatical year. In Leviticus, we read, "The Eternal said to Moses on Mount Sinai, 'Speak to the Israelites and say to them, once you enter the land that I am giving you, the land must celebrate a Sabbath rest to the Eternal. You will plant your fields for 6 years and prune your vineyards and gather their crops for 6 years. But in the 7th year, the land will have a special Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Eternal.'" In other words, every 7th year, the earth gets a Sabbath, which allows it to regenerate, just as our weekly Sabbath gives us a chance to regenerate ourselves. What was in the fields was plowed under, and people could eat only what the earth produced without cultivation. Tradition says that this law was ignored for centuries during the biblical period. But then, in 586 BCE, the Temple of Solomon and the city of Jerusalem were destroyed. Most of the people were exiled to Babylonia or escaped to Egypt. The land went fallow for 70 years. Before that happened, the prophet Jeremiah, who saw that the destruction was coming, warned of a catastrophe to come. He wrote, "This whole country will become a desolate wasteland, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. This is what the Eternal says. The whole land will be ruined, though I will not destroy it completely." Much later on, the chronicler, the writer of the book of Chronicles, wrote, "The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Eternal spoken by Jeremiah. In other words, the land got the rest and restoration that was denied to it when people did not observe the sabbatical years over those centuries. However, the best part of this story is that despite such a catastrophe as total destruction and exile, there was hope. Jeremiah taught us hope, not just with words. He acted. Jeremiah had a familial obligation to purchase a certain field in the city of Anatot. Even knowing the destruction soon to come, Jeremiah bought that land. He wrote or said, "So I bought the field in Anatot from my cousin Hanamel, and I weighed out 17 shekels of silver, signed and sealed the deed, called in witnesses, and weighed out the silver on the scales. In their sight, I instructed Baruch, this is what the Eternal of Hosts, the God of Israel, says. Take these deeds, both the sealed copy and the open copy of the deed of purchase, and put them in a clay jar to preserve them for a long time. For this is what the Eternal of Hosts, the God of Israel, says. Houses, fields, and vineyards will again be bought in this land." In other words, Jeremiah saw, or the Lord told him to see, beyond the catastrophe. The Torah teaches us from the beginning to take care of the land on which our lives depend. We must not maximize its use, but allow it to rest. We must practice good stewardship by not overusing the land. Jeremiah also understood that the restored land would again be fertile and would sustain life. Earth has the capacity to heal herself. The present crisis can remind us of our role as caretakers of creation. The coronavirus reminds us that given a chance, Earth can heal herself.
Thank you, Rabbi. My name is Reverend Kevin Bates. I'm one of the pastors of Way in the Wilderness United Methodist Church in the Upper Swannanoa River Valley, or Black Mountain Swannanoa, as most of you all probably know it. And this morning we had a conversation just around these very same things with our church. We talked about, as we've heard from the panelists, that we are all deeply interconnected. There's this connection that we have with the creation that is told about from the very beginning in Genesis, with God breathing life into soil and then creating not just human beings from the soil, but trees and animals and plants. We've heard about it from other panelists talk about how even science has come around to this understanding over time that we are deeply interconnected. And yet we also know that, as we've said throughout our time together, that this interconnection has been strained, it has been broken. Our relationship with the land is broken. We have failed to live into that relationship justly and with love. And so the question becomes, where do we go from here? How do we go from here? Well, if the problem is we failed to live in love with the creation, then the answer might just be that we need to fall in love again with the creation. If we were to follow the book of Genesis, we began with the story of God creating out of the soil and this goodness, the goodness of this relationship, and how this relationship breaks down between God and the humans. And then that same relationship breaks down between God, or between the humans and the creation, when God says, that same soil that you were created out of, Adam, now it's going to be hard to grow. It won't be easy. There will be hostility. And that relationship that has now been broken between God and the human beings and the creation then extends to other human beings with the story of Cain and Abel. Each relationship follows the next. But if we were to continue the book of Genesis, we get to this really wonderful story of Noah. And there's this line right at the beginning of the story where it talks about how every human heart was inclined to evil all the time. We can kind of look around at the world today and we see some of that, right? We see some of this evil, we see the destruction, and we lament over it. And then we hear in the story that there's this great flood, and Noah and his family get on this ark with a number of every one of the creatures of the earth. And often we read the story as some sort of escape vessel, that Noah's ark is all about escaping God's wrath or something like that. But what if Noah's ark wasn't about escaping? What if it was more like a school? What if the ark was meant to teach us how to live into right and just relationship with the creation and even with one another? I think for a moment how hard it must have been for Noah to have fed all the animals on the ark. I mean, just think about that for a moment. I mean, I know how to feed like dogs and cats, and I could put some bird seed outside, but I have no idea like what a hippo eats, or a giraffe, or a fruit fly, or how often they eat, or like what time of day do they eat, and how do I keep these animals from eating each other? I mean, I can't imagine what Noah must have been going through. And these ancient rabbis would tell these midrash stories about how Noah stayed awake the entire time because he was thrilled and wonder and amazement and just loved caring for these creatures. What he must have learned in that time must have been amazing. And then when the flood ended, he was faced with the choice whether to take that knowledge and recreate the world based upon that right relationship he had learned about on the ark, or go back to the ways which we were told were evil in every way. I've begun to wonder if this time of COVID-19 is kind of like our ark. I mean, hear me very clearly that God did not cause this pandemic. This is not something that God did, but perhaps God is teaching us something through it. Maybe when we emerge from our time of isolation, we will be asked the same question. What will we create? Will we recreate the world based upon right relationships of love? Or will we just go back to the way we were doing it before, as Rabbi just told us, that the earth is breathing again, right? We are seeing the world come alive around us. Will we just go back? Or will we recreate based upon love? St. Hildegard in the 12th century says that if we were to fall in love with creation deeper and deeper, then we would respond to its endangerment with passion. And that's from the 12th century. It's such a beautiful thing to think about. If we would just fall in love again, which of course brings us right back to where we started this time with Will. We fall in love by learning to see, by learning to notice, by being grateful and thankful for this creation. There's been so many ways that I feel like I've been taught about gratitude lately, but one of the ways that you're going to even have access to is the scavenger hunt the Creation Care Alliance put together, where you can go around and see some of your neighborhood natives, from robins and wood sorrel to white pines and hollies. I did this with my own family and with the family next door, and it was amazing what the children began to see, to hold a bumblebee, to notice the yellow flowers of the wood sorrel, to be grateful. My own daughter, who's 14 months old, took a piece of mint that she had found and stuck it to her nose and took a deep breath, and then pushed it in our own face and invited us to do the same. She wondered, she was grateful, she was amazed, and if we would do the same, maybe we'd find ourselves falling in love again. And if we find ourselves falling in love again, then we will respond to what's happening with passion. We will respond as any loving parent or grandparent or family member would do for our own loved ones. We would give everything we had. And not just because we think this is the best way to somehow save the planet or to free it from the things that are happening, but because we love it. And because we believe this is our hope, that all things will be reconciled and put into right relationship again. Maybe it begins with love, because cynicism won't save us. Only love can do that.
Only love can do that. I wonder if if a line or an experience, a moment has impacted you just in the past 50, 45 minutes or so. And if so, if we could share that as a moment of reflection. And our format is such that we could hear that through the chat, but also Katie's willing to respond to raising hands. And I think in your Zoom box, you're in the bottom right-hand side, there's a way to raise your hand. And then Catie, maybe would you tell people where to find that hand raising part?
Sure. If you're in the Zoom window at the bottom, there's a menu that pops up where you've been accessing your chat box. There's also a raise hand button. If you click that, it'll let me know that you've raised your hand, and then I can unmute you so you can share with us.
That's great. Thank you. So if you had an experience of, we're looking for just a sentence or a word to express how you were impacted, how you might have been inspired, what new vision you might have experienced just from this 45 minutes or so. And then we'll come back, we'll not come back together, we'll then hear another song from Jenna and have some closing words. And then you're all invited to a virtual reception, which we'll get the link. Some of you have that link already, but then we'll be able to do a little bit more conversation. So anyone that's interested in doing that, that will be coming a little bit later. But for now, in the chat or verbally through hand raising, just share with us what's happened for you in the past 45 minutes. What do you notice? I'm reading from the chat. Gratitude for Hildegard of Bingen. Gratitude for the panelists, for all the messages, importance of loving relationships with each other, creatures and earth. Jeremiah planning for the deep future in the face of cataclysm. More peaceful and content. I love the vision of the earth getting its Sabbath rest. And the 1 square foot adventure and discovery idea. I loved that. Expression of being more hopeful. Gratitude. This is really amazing. Thank you all for sharing courageously and passionately from various perspectives. Touched deeply, and she feels so fortunate to have so many incredible spiritual beings right here in Western North Carolina. Gratitude for talk of recovering of the land, and reminds how Iran brought deserts back. Gratitude for the song, Walk Slow. And for having the chance to look out the window, the lake and the wind, listening for words of hope and inspiration. Jenna, as people continue to share their words through the chat, I wonder if you would offer us a song of blessing, and then I'll close us with some words.
Sure. Oh, this has been so rich. Thank you all. This is a song of blessing by Sarah Groves. May God give us eyes to see and ears to hear anew going forward. May God give you eyes to see all that is good, all that is good. The courage for anything. May you be strong. May you be strong. May God give you ears to hear their loving voice, their loving voice, speaking all around you, all around, and deep inside. May God give you eyes to see all that is good, all that is good. The courage for anything. May you be strong, may you be strong. May God give you ears to hear their loving voice, their loving voice, speaking all around you, all around, and deep inside.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I am deeply grateful for the words of our panelists, for the music, for 2 to 3 minutes of rest in the day to ponder and to see images in the trees outside my window. I'm grateful for all of those of you who have attended, who have offered your own heart to this space for an hour to acknowledge this deep connection that we have to the earth. Some ways that you can continue this. Many of you are already connected to the Creation Care Alliance, and invite you to take a look at our website. We have several events coming up, and Mountain True is doing good work right now, caring for our forests and for our rivers and for our air and our cities. And Creation Care Alliance is doing the same thing. We recognize that faith communities are going through a transition unlike any they've ever experienced. And yet we still hope to engage and support the new vision of how church might be, how congregation might be, how faith community might be. And so we hope to be in your neighborhood in the next 6 months or so to be a part of a listening tour. It may be virtually, but we want to be in the high country and in the western part of the state and down in the southern part of the state and hear how you all are doing creation care and what your needs might be, and particularly how Creation Care Alliance and Mountain True might support you in the work that you're doing, caring for your neighbors and caring for creation. So now, may you be bold in the ways that you live out your life. May you have the hope of a Jeremiah who's planning beyond the catastrophe. And may your eyes open like those on the road to Emmaus, to a new awareness of delight and goodness and life. And may you see all of your places as schools of compassion, that your love might multiply. May you receive from these forests and your neighbors and your family whispers of the breath of love. And may you know that you are more powerful than you might imagine, particularly when you partner with one another and with this good creation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Catie's will remind us of our link. If you want to grab a iced tea or hot tea or whatever you want to grab, and then we'll come back to that other link, and then we'll do a little bit more just conversational chatting and do some talking that way. Catie, is there anything else you need to say about that?
So I went ahead and put the link to the reception in the chat box. We'll leave this one open for another minute or two so everyone can grab that link, and then we'll transition over. So give us about 5 minutes for that transition, and then we'll hopefully see some of you at the reception for some discussion.
Great.
The link should also be in the emails that you all got sent confirming when you signed up, or when Scott sent you all the new link this afternoon. So if you lose it in the chat box, you can find it in those locations too.
And thank you, Catie, and thank you all. We'll see some of you later.